Today, we are going to dive deep into the forces behind compulsion, but we're going to do it through a really fascinating and, well, ancient lens: alchemy. Now, I'm not talking about the old dream of turning lead into actual gold. Nope, we're talking about the psychological art of using its powerful symbols to map the hidden, often tricky landscapes of our own minds. So, let's begin.
The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung just sets the stage for us perfectly here. He frames compulsion not as some simple bad habit, but as a central, profound mystery of human life. And in doing so, he hands us our very first alchemical key: sulfur. That's the symbol for this powerful, unconscious force, this dynamism that drives us all.
So this approach is what we're calling the alchemical lens. It's really just a way of seeing, a framework for understanding how these incredibly old symbols can map the very real, very modern complexities of our own minds.
Okay, so the alchemist Paracelsus, way back when, saw three core principles that animate our inner world. First, you've got sulfur. That's the fiery soul of desire. Then there's salt, the body, our physical reality, our fixations. And finally, mercury. That's the volatile spirit that kind of dances between them. Now, for our purposes today, we're really going to focus on the tense, often combative relationship between the first two, sulfur and salt.
So first up, let's take a closer look at sulfur. Think of it as the fiery will. This is the engine of our desire, right? The burning stone, the brimstone within us.
Psychologically speaking, sulfur is that hot, almost demonic principle in all of us. It's our motivation, our desirousness, the thing that gets us out of bed. But here's the catch. It has this incredibly dangerous duality. As Jung pointed out, it can be our conscious will, that life-giving warmth that we direct toward our goals. Or, if left unchecked, it can become compulsion, an involuntary, inflammable impulse. It's both a pharmacon, a medicine, and a poison. It can be a life-giving warmth, or it can be a consuming fire that leads straight to burnout and just endless painful repetition.
All right, and now for sulfur's complete opposite, salt. We're calling it the taste of pain, because it's the grounding principle of our embodied and, often very difficult experience.
So if sulfur is fire, salt is earth. It represents the body, stability, the concrete, nitty-gritty reality of our lives. And just like sulfur, salt is profoundly dual-natured. On one hand, it's the bitterness of undigested disappointment. It's literally the taste of salty tears. But through deep psychological work, that very same bitterness can be transformed into wisdom. The trauma, which one analyst calls a salt mine, can become the very ground of our unique identity, that irreducible eachness of who we truly are.
The analyst James Hillman just makes this connection so explicit. Trauma is a salt mine. It forces us into our bodies, doesn't it? Into that painful, shocking awareness of our own vulnerability. Salt is what makes us feel the sting of life, and it's from that very sting that real, authentic self-awareness can finally begin to emerge.
So this is all pretty theoretical, right? The crucial question is, how do these forces actually play out in a real person's life? Well, to understand that, we're going to look at the clinical story of a woman, let's call her Julia, whose life is just this powerful, raw illustration of this whole alchemical drama.
This was Julia's core belief. It's a phrase she actually said in therapy, and it just perfectly captures the fiery, demanding, and honestly entitled nature of a life completely dominated by what the alchemists would call vulgar sulfur, just this relentless, compulsive drive.
Julia's entire history was a textbook case of this kind of sulfuric conditioning. Her mother, dealing with her own stuff, imposed this incredibly harsh regime of achievement. So for Julia, love always felt conditional, something she had to earn through performance. And as a result, her whole life became this series of compulsive cycles, massive investments of energy followed by a total collapse, and then another furious investment, all designed to avoid that terrifying feeling of failure.
Now, in alchemy, there's this central idea called the Coniunctio. It's meant to be the sacred union of opposites. It's where all the transformation happens. But for Julia, this union wasn't some gentle integration. No, it was a violent, wounding collision. Her unstoppable sulfuric fire was about to slam headfirst into the immovable reality of salt. And really, this question is at the very heart of her crisis. Her entire psychic structure, everything about her, was engineered to outrun pain, to achieve her way past vulnerability. But what happens? What happens when that unstoppable fire meets an immovable object of pain?
The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in waves. First, a divorce, which for her felt like this profound personal failure. Then, a complete regression. We're talking weeks spent literally drowning in the salty tears of her grief. And finally, the pain lodged itself physically in her body, as a slip disc. The salt had finally, forcefully erupted into her life. It all culminated in this raw, direct challenge to her therapist, an accusation of failure.
In this is the turning point. Instead of defending himself or explaining things away, the analyst does something pretty remarkable. He just surrenders. He joins her in that feeling of failure. He admits his own sense of incompetence in that moment. He doesn't try to fix it. He simply enters what he called the wasteland with her, creating this shared experience of the very thing she had spent her entire life running from.
And it's right there, in that shared moment of salt, this raw, accepted failure, that the third alchemical principle can finally emerge: mercury. Mercury is the imagination. It's the capacity for symbolic thought. It's the wit and the fluid spirit that can mediate between these two fixed opposites of sulfur and salt. This is the real beginning of transformation, of turning lead to gold.
The result? A profound fundamental shift in her entire way of being. That fiery, sulfuric demand of karma owes me finally gave way to the salty, earthy, and surprisingly mercurial acceptance of, well, shit happens. And this isn't just resignation, it's a radical acceptance of life's inherent difficulty, and that's what freed her from the compulsive need to constantly fight it. This incredible new image emerged in her therapy. She used to feel like she was compulsively weaving new fabric to cover up the holes of her past traumas. But she had this realization that the new fabric, it just ended up with the same holes in it. So what's the mercurial solution? Stop weaving forward. Instead, turn back and learn to knit around the edges of the holes themselves, reinforcing their borders, giving them shape and context, instead of trying to pretend they don't exist.
And, this whole process even developed a sense of humor, which is a sure sign that Mercury is at work. While talking about her fear of falling into one of these holes, the image of Swiss cheese just popped up. She realized the holes are actually essential to the cheese's character. And then she joked that maybe cheddar should have holes too, so there'd be less of it. Just a brilliant, witty integration of her whole new perspective.
And so, this brings us to the end, where we turn that alchemical lens back on ourselves. What is the embodied pain, the unavoidable failure, the salt in your own life? And what is the fiery, compulsive sulfur you use to try and outrun it, to cover it up? Because the alchemists teach us that the real gold, the real transformation, is only ever found when those two opposites finally and courageously meet.